facts, what I wanted to do this week is quite unusual. I don't often do replays, but I wanted to replay this episode, this conversation with Emily Clarke for you, because I think it's all still highly relevant. We're still sort of in the pandemic, maybe coming out of it, we're not quite sure, but the impact of the pandemic is still here in terms of the social and economic impact. And the conversation that Emily and Clarke and I had last year is still highly relevant to what we're trying to do within the independent school sector. Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello, and this week we are going to be diving into partnerships. Now, as I'm recording this introduction, I'm actually in the lead up to the Bursaries and Partnerships Conference run by HMC, AGBIS and IDPE in London. Those of you who are listening will actually probably have just attended if you were at that conference. Obviously, I record these slightly ahead of time. So as I've been gearing up for that conference and thinking about the trends and the patterns that we're seeing within bursaries and partnerships, I was reminded of an episode in the podcast that I broadcast about a year ago. And it was a conversation with Emily Clarke, Director of Development at Highgate School, about fundraising for community partnerships. And I was looking through the stats for my podcast, and I also noticed that actually this is one of the most popular episodes within the podcast ever since we started in the summer of 2020. So given those facts, what I wanted to do this week is quite unusual. I don't often do replays, but I wanted to replay this episode, this conversation with Emily Clarke for you, because I think it's all still highly relevant. We're still sort of in the pandemic, maybe coming out of it, we're not quite sure, but the impact of the pandemic is still here in terms of the social and economic impact. And the conversation that Emily and Clarke and I had last year is still highly relevant to what we're trying to do within the independent school sector today. So this week, I'm going to replay that conversation for you to listen to. Very briefly before we do that, just to let you know that I have a couple of other episodes, new episodes, coming up around the partnerships and the bursaries theme. So in a week or two, I'm going to be giving you my rundown of my takeaways from the conference. And then I'm also just about to record a really interesting conversation around partnerships, which I'll be sharing with you in a couple of weeks as well. So do look out for those if you're looking for some up-to-date information around this particular topic. Really quickly, before we dive into the detail, I want to make sure that you make the most of the time you invest listening to this podcast. And the best way to do that is to make sure you grab a copy of my free ebook, The Strategic Independent School Leader. It outlines how to answer the 6 essential questions that will clarify your school strategy and secure its future. In the world of business, strategy can be full of jargon, but it doesn't have to be that way. This is a jargon-free tool tailor-made to help private school leaders think and act more strategically. Download your free copy today at www.consultjuliette.co.uk/ebook. We're going to be talking this week about community partnerships, and specifically about fundraising for community partnerships. So I'm delighted to be joined by Emily Clarke of Highgate School to dive into this subject. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you'll know that one of the things that gives my work meaning, and that's something that I feel really personally connected to, is how we can widen access to excellent education. And that's been a bit of a theme all the way through my career. So I've been helping universities and independent schools to really step up their bursary provision, all with the goal of improving social mobility.
more recently, so especially since summer 2020, when the anti-racist movement and the Black Lives Matter movement gained a bit more momentum, a little bit more profile, I've been taking steps to educate myself more about the institutionalised injustices that we have embedded almost invisibly within our society and our systems. And this has really been an eye-opening experience for me to read more about this area. So I've been trying to find ways that I can build some of these issues into my work a little bit more. So this is now one of the real priority areas that I'm working in. Now, you'll have heard earlier in this series me talking a lot about bursary strategy. So back in episode 19, I set out a framework for 4 building blocks of strategy, applying it to bursary strategy to help schools to get going in expanding or in starting their bursary programmes. And then in episode 20, I spoke to Bart Wielenga, who was the head of Blundell School, about getting some more of a reality check about the real challenges that heads can face in getting bursaries more established within their schools. So we've kind of covered off some of the bursary subjects. One thing we haven't talked about much so far in this podcast is community partnerships. And this is a growing way that schools are expanding access to excellent education, but taking a different route to the same goal compared to the work they're doing in their bursaries. It's something which I spoke about back in the summer of 2020 as being an area which I thought we could see more successful fundraising happening. So I'm really thrilled to be joined this week by Emily Clarke, the Director of Development at Highgate School, to talk about the fundraising they've been doing in their community partnerships work. So Emily joined the development office at Highgate back in 2014, and since 2018 she's been leading the school through the quiet phase of a fundraising campaign. She was appointed Director of Development in June 2020. Highgate School has been really forging ahead in the area of state school partnerships, bursaries, inclusion for many, many years now. And it won the TES Senior School of the Year and Independent School of the Year awards in 2020. And one of the things that the judges commented on when they were making public those awards was the partnerships work that Highgate had been doing. And the partnerships with other schools across London, both through their Christmas programme and the London Academy of Excellence Tottenham, were both specifically name-checked as being some of the reasons why Highgate was awarded those prestigious awards. So when it came to December 2020 and Highgate School was awarded the London Independent Secondary School of the Decade by the Sunday Times and Parent Power, the judges noted that there were few schools in the country that could match Highgate in both its sustained academic excellence and the work it undertakes to disseminate best practice to raise educational standards in the state sector. So it's got really established credentials in the area of school partnerships and in the area of bursary provision as well. So I wanted to talk to Emily Clarke about the fundraising elements of what they're doing and how the journey they've taken over the last year since the pandemic hit has really shaped what they're looking to do in the future. So with no further ado, let's dive into my conversation with Emily. Welcome, Emily, and welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
It is. So, first of all, Emily, I thought we could kick off by talking a little bit about Highgate's history and how the commitment that your school has to partnerships, bursaries, inclusion, that whole kind of area seems to really stem from its charitable foundation over 450 years ago, which isn't unusual. There are many schools across the UK where that's the case, but it seems like it's a really integral part of the school's day-to-day culture as well in conversations we've previously had. Is that how it feels to you as a Director of Development, that you're kind of living out your school's historical purpose?
Very much so, but as Director of Development, I would say that. So what I think is more powerful is, I think if you were to ask any member of staff, any pupil, any parent, and if you ask them, is Highgate a charity? I feel like most of them would say yes. So St Roger Chumley School at Highgate, to give us our full title, was founded in 1565, and we were founded as a charity which runs the school. And obviously, lots of things have changed since then. But I do think that one thing that's remained very constant and very true is our commitment to building on our charitable origins and to really sort of make a difference to children in the way that the world at the time requires. It might be through offering bursaries, which give more children the chance to study at Highgate, or through our kind of partnership teaching work with local schools, or a lot of the work that we've done with our local community in light of the COVID pandemic.
I love the fact that you're talking about kind of keeping it into what's appropriate for today's environment. So it's having that clear vision about the overall ambition of having that positive impact and offering children access to excellent education. And then the exact details of how you do it can be crafted and changed depending on the changing circumstances.
Completely. I feel like a bit of a hypocrite sort of talking to you about strategy because you're the queen of strategy. But I think if you've got a really clear vision laid out, it allows you the flexibility to be nimble within it. And I think I've worked at Highgate for 6 years now, but something I've always really felt is that the work we do does feel really relevant. And we feel like we're at the vanguard of what's happening in the education sector, which I guess has been reflected in the recent Sunday Times Award, which I went, for a few minutes without mentioning. But on a more sort of serious point, it really has been reflected in the past year and our response to the COVID pandemic. It's different to what we've ever done before, but it feels really true to the sort of school and the sort of charity that we are. And I think some of it is about authenticity, and kind of if it feels wrong, perhaps it is, and if it feels right, it probably is. And it really is just kind of building on what's gone before it. So the work that we've done with our community in the past year or so has only been made possible because we've had really good links with our community in the years before that. I think I often say this. I don't think anyone would design the school system again the way it is at the moment. I think if we were starting from fresh, we wouldn't replicate it as it is. But one of the things that I love about working at Highgate is that I think it really shows the strengths of the partnership and sort of like what can come together when the independent sector and the state sector have those relationships and can work really effectively as partners.
Yeah, and throughout the work that I have done over the years with independent schools, there is a genuine root of authentic passion and belief that this needs to be improved. As you say, you wouldn't design it the way it is designed. This is kind of where we are. And so in order to change and make social mobility more possible, to have a positive impact on society, what is it that we can do? And we've talked in the sector a lot about bursaries in the past, and that's obviously very important, and previous episodes in this podcast have focused on that. But I'd really like to talk a little bit more about the community partnerships, because I know this is one of the areas where Highgate gets frequently commended in these sorts of awards that you've received for this partnership work. So you've got the Chrysalis programme and the London Academy of Excellence in Tottenham. I'd love for you to just share with us a little bit more about what those projects involve.
This is one of my absolute favourite things to talk about, so you'll have to mute my microphone when I've been going on too long. But yes, starting with Chrysalis. So for the last decade, much of our charitable work has come through our Chrysalis Partnership Programme, and it started as a summer school for local year 12s. And over the years, it's grown into a year-round programme involving over 50 local, state and state primary and secondary schools. I find the numbers so sort of bamboozling, but before when I was kind of preparing for this, I was having a look, and over 3,500 children have interacted with Highgate's partnership work in the past year alone. And this takes loads of different forms. It's either academic enrichment, university preparation, or sort of the softer side, kind of developing skills for resilience, for employability. And even though all the different activities are diverse, the aim of Chrysalis is always the same. We want to inspire children to go on to study at the next level. So whether that's getting a pupil in year 6 really inspired about going to high school and being able to do, maths 5 times a week and just feeling really excited about that, or whether it's showing a 16-year-old who has the potential to do so, that they could go to university and be the first in their family to do that. I absolutely love Chrysalis because I just think it really illustrates how committed Highgate is to social justice, social mobility. Year on year, you just see the results of it because you see how much the children that we work with sort of thrive with this setup. And as an extension of this, we became the primary educational sponsor of the London Academy of Excellence in Tottenham in 2017. And this is as a direct result of our kind of recognised experience in the state independent partnership sector. So LAT has 2 lead sponsors. Tottenham Hotspur is the lead business sponsor, and we are the lead education sponsor. And the school itself is located in an absolutely amazing building, which is right next door to the Spurs Stadium. It's such an amazing place. LAT receives government funding, but a lot of the opportunities that are available to the students, things like being able to take 4 A-levels, being taught in smaller classes, a full co-curricular programme, mental health support, are only possible thanks to the support of the sponsors and of donors who support the school as well. And it's located in a community where opportunities like this aren't commonplace. So Northumberland Park, which is where the school is located, is actually one of the country's 2% poorest boroughs. And again, sometimes I do just think statistics are so hard hitting. At the moment in Tottenham, 45% of working age people are unemployed or furloughed. 51% of LAT students receive free school meals. And before the school opened, only 1% of children from Tottenham were going on to Russell Group universities. I must have said that statistic and read that statistic so many times, and it just shocks me every time. And I think it makes the work we do at LET so satisfying because, again, you can really see the results. So last year's year 13s, despite all the disruption that every year 13 in the country had last year, achieved amazing things, and 74% of them got A star to B in their A-levels, and more than 2/3 went off to Russell Group universities. So it really, really shows like what fantastic things can be given when opportunity is provided.
Absolutely. And you're right, those statistics, I mean, often we're bamboozled by statistics all day, and most of the time my brain just switches off from them, to be totally honest. But I think it's when you actually think about not just the statistics, when you think about the lives and the families that are living those statistics, those statistics emerge from a lived experience, which is not something which I am particularly familiar with on a personal basis. And I think that's probably true of many in the independent school sector. It's not something that we're necessarily seeing on a regular basis as a lived experience in our own lives. And so really taking the time to think about what those statistics mean and how that connects through to that authenticity of purpose, that vision of our own personal why. Why do we do this kind of work? Why are we here to help children? Well, it really becomes a powerful motivator for people to want to make change. I think there is a big difference, though, between wanting to make change and to see that change around improving social mobility, improving social justice. There is an increasingly strong sense that there is a desire to see these things change and that the independent school sector has a significant role to play. I think then there's a little bit of a gap between that belief and that knowing what you want to do and then actually doing it. And so I think it's particularly impressive for Highgate that you are able to showcase to others what works. I'm sure there are some things that you tried that didn't work, that actually you wouldn't recommend other people take certain routes. But I'd be really interested to hear about the journey that you've gone on with your fundraising, perhaps specifically during the pandemic, and how you've adjusted that fundraising in order to serve what is simultaneously a massively increased need in this area, alongside new challenges that we're facing with regards to securing support from donors who potentially are feeling the pinch in terms of the economy, in terms of uncertainty.
Yeah, completely. So like many of us, I think, I was so nervous in March and April about what the sort of coming period would look like for Highgate as a charity. But I think, again, probably like many of us, I realised really quickly that instead of a moment where charities should, feel nervous and feel like it's going to be difficult, it's a moment for charities to step up and think it is going to be difficult, but that's why we're here. We're here when times are tough. And I think it's, as I sort of mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, it's been really satisfying to see what a difference we can make in line with kind of our current vision by reframing our plans. So something that we always say at Highgate is that we're always led by the need. So we always follow the needs of our community. And it was us that they came to when they needed support in the first few weeks of the first lockdown. And we were actually contacted by numerous people asking for help. So this could be kind of local schools, local individuals, local groups. And we were also contacted by lots of people wanting to help. So this is something that I remember feeling personally at the start of the first lockdown. I felt like my life hadn't been impacted as much as some people's had. I really wanted to sort of do something. So at Highgate, to coordinate, these two sides, we formed Highgate is Here, which was a sort of overarching umbrella to coordinate our efforts, to maximise our impact, and to make sure our response was in line with our objectives. And I'm sort of smiling as I talk about it because in the midst of one of the darkest situations, it really did feel positive right from the beginning. So in our kind of like very crisis response phase, we did feel like we were able to make an impact quickly for those who really needed it. So within the first sort of month or two, we'd raised £70,000 for digital access. And that was such an amazing way for our community to make a real difference really quickly. I think as much as Highgate is Here was a short-term kind of crisis response, I think I've realised that COVID's changed everything forever. And Highgate is Here is now just the way we're going to do things as a charity, because it allows us the breadth to make an impact in the way that the community needs, whilst also, I'm like a broken record, but kind of staying true to our objectives, which are to provide an education and to provide relief of the poor. So the needs that have really come to the fore through Highgate is Here have become what we call the 5 pillars of Highgate is Here. So they're the mental health and well-being, they're continuing digital access, they're expanding our chrysalis programme, and they're moving outside the kind of purely academics to make sure that we're reaching children of all backgrounds. And it's extending our bursary programme by offering bursaries in our junior school for the first time. I think there's no way in which you can say that COVID has been an opportunity, but I think it's allowed us to be a bit more confident about who we are as a charity and to, really actively say that. And I think that's why I kind of started the beginning of this podcast saying now in 2021, there'd be few people in the Highgate community who didn't realise we were a charity and weren't able to say something about that. And as a fundraiser or someone who has, worked in the development office for a while, that's a really good feeling because it feels like a virtuous circle. The more people who know, the more people who are on board, the more impact we're going to be able to make and the more we're going to be able to do. So it's been really interesting as a fundraiser as well to see how this has really galvanised supporters and potential supporters.
Yes. Because
there's no hiding from the need anymore. I think, I don't know, in other years it is quite easy just to sort of, not pay attention to things. But in the past few months, that just hasn't been possible. And that has, people that I've been speaking to, prospects that I've been speaking to for years, really have been galvanised And many people have made pledges that I've been hoping that they might make for ages. It's been this year that they've chosen to do it. And it really is brilliant to kind of see respected, significant philanthropists choosing to sort of, actualise their vision through Highgate. And I think the greatest demonstration of this has been Chrysalis East. Current donor has pledged a ring-fence gift of £3 million to fund the expansion of the Chrysalis Partnership Teaching Model in Tottenham's local area. So Highgate works in the west of the borough of Haringey and Tottenham works in the east. So this project is going to be called Chrysalis East. And it's going to pretty much exactly follow the model that Highgate has employed in the west in order to raise ambitions, aspiration and outcome of local students who, many of whom have the potential to be studying somewhere at LUT, eventually going off to Russell Group universities and, benefiting their community in the long run, but just at the moment aren't able to do that. And this is something that we feel really excited about because it's really powerful long-term change coming out of the immediate impact of COVID. This donor realised that he could make a difference in this area, and this was the time that he chose to do it. And it really is brilliant to see something so good come out of something so bad.
Absolutely. And I think it's very easy to fall into the assumption that, everybody's suffering at the moment, so there's no point fundraising. I think most schools have overcome that now, but back in the very early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of kind of discussion. Should we be fundraising? Should we stop fundraising? What's the right approach to take? And I think what we've seen since that time is the schools that have continued to authentically put together a case for support that responds to the current needs, that have continued to engage with donors in developing those relationships and deepening those relationships, and have authentically responded, because some of those donors have been, negatively impacted either economically or for health reasons. And so for some people, it's not right that you continue a potential major gift conversation at this time, but by being authentic and by communicating, I think many schools have found that there are donors out there who are engaged in what they're doing and want to support, want to have the opportunity to make a transformation through their philanthropic donation, just as you found in response to the Chrysalis East project. I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the different types of fundraising you've been using. So I know you've continued with the kind of major gifts relationships, but you've also been doing some mass fundraising, so some challenge events and things like that.
Yeah, we've done a couple. I think in part because we really recognise that lots of people in our community did want to get involved and wanted to do something, and we wanted to allow them the opportunity to do that. And I think we're also lucky to have, sorry, I hesitated, but we are lucky to have a head teacher who is a marathon runner and who almost at the drop of a hat agreed to run a marathon for us, running laps of the school site. It really galvanised people, because it was at that time in the first lockdown when we were only allowed out one time a day for exercise, and we were all sick to death of our local park and wanting to do something that, helped those who were suffering more than we did but didn't quite know what to do. As I said earlier, we raised £70,000 with that challenge because people felt so inspired by the outcome. We all understood the benefit of having a laptop, and we all understood that our £50 would really do something to help there. And I think that's one of the best examples that I've seen at Highgate and elsewhere of real community participation, because we really did have, gifts of £15,000 and gifts of £5. All the noise and all the awareness that this fundraiser generated, and the fact that people are now talking about digital poverty and inequality in a way that we weren't 10 months ago. And we sort of built on the success of that first fundraiser to hold another one in November. And again, it involved Adam Pettit running a marathon, this time from Highgate to Tottenham, which is actually only 4 miles, so he could have made his life a lot easier. But he ran a kind of a circuit that took 26 miles. Because the first one had been so successful, we were really keen to get people involved. So we opened it out and kind of said, if you want to run 5K, get some sponsorship, and this can all be part of a wider fundraiser for our sibling school at LET. People at LET, if you want to do something, do it. Get people to sponsor you, get people to share it on their Instagram, and all be part of a kind of wider effort. And we did like a really great remote fundraiser where everyone's individual effort was made to feel like something collective, because we shared it on social media, because we had a hashtag, because we kept kind of posting about it. And again, we raised over £80,000, and this came from, I think it was over 600 donors in the end, which is just, it's incredible, and like nothing I've ever seen before at Highgate. And again, it just made such a difference. In this case, it was to provide like weekly hardship support for LET families who'd lost their jobs, who weren't able to pay the bills, who weren't able to put food on the table, like real support that no one can argue with. I think, again, I'm sounding a bit like a Pollyanna, aren't I? I keep coming back to all the positives, but this has just been wonderful to see how it's really galvanised and piqued the interest of members of our community that we just haven't before.
Fantastic. And the couple of things that immediately spring to mind for me are the two things that really excite me going forwards is firstly seeing innovation in the fundraising techniques that we're using. So we're breaking out a little bit from the idea of, we've got to have the annual fund, the major gifts and the legacies, and heaven forbid we go beyond those. The idea that there are all sorts of different ways that we can have fun and raise money. And I think it is about having fun as well as raising money.
Yeah, I do.
And the other thing that really springs to mind is that, of course, when you open up your case for support to be something which is so authentically and genuinely going to be beneficial to something which people care about well beyond your traditional school community, when something is rooted in a passion to improve individual life chances, to overcome issues of social injustice that we've had entrenched in our society for so many generations, you do open up to beyond your own traditional kind of school fundraising prospects pool. You do open up to potentially additional trusts and foundations, thinking about corporations that want to get involved, thinking about other local community groups. This is so much more exciting than the slightly more traditional way that we've always done it within the independent school sector.
Completely. And I think it's a bit more uncomfortable. I've probably felt more nervous at points over the past year than I felt in previous years. But that's because we have been trying new things, and we have been sort of putting our necks on the line a little bit. It'd be really embarrassing to do something as public as a marathon and then not raise any money from it. That would be really embarrassing. But I think it's been seen to take these sort of big steps and to still have bold plans and bold ambitions that makes you a successful charity. And that's something I love about Highgate, that we never want to just be a sticking plaster. We don't want just to help everyone's life get back to normal, because for lots of people in our community, for lots of children and families in our partner schools, normal wasn't good. And I think I don't know, this is such a basic point, but we've all seen inequality sort of shone in bright relief over the past few months. And I think something that, the reason I'm still working at Highgate 6 years later is because we're so inspired to do what we can and to make a difference in the long term. And I think the more you can talk in that sort of exciting, ambitious, positive language, the more people want to get on board, and the more successful your fundraising campaigns, your individual donor meetings, the more successful it all is, because you're the way that people can see that they can make a difference. And it's so rewarding to be able to help people to do that, to be involved with that.
Just to reflect something you said earlier, I'm sounding very positive all the time. I'm gonna force us to think about some of the challenges just for a couple of minutes. So one of the things we spoke about on a previous episode, we were talking about innovation, was the culture within independent schools largely doesn't like the idea that something isn't perfect the first time, that kind of perfectionist approach that we take to our work often. Was there a time when you consciously put yourself out there to say, we're going to do something, we don't know if it's going to work? And how did it feel, and what was the response within the school community and from senior leadership and so on, that you were going to try something that you weren't really convinced was going to be a massive success?
everything that we've done since the start of the pandemic has been a bit of a punt, because even though it's been within the areas that we've worked in, it's community, it's education, it is all different. And it, especially in spring, it felt like a massive step away from what we've been talking about. So in early March, we held a fundraising gala, which, you know, it feels like a completely different world, thinking about packing 250 people into a room and, you know, laughing at a party. Remember that? And that was to launch our junior school bursary programme. So for the past 2 years, I've been spending my time kind of setting up and actualising the quiet phase of this campaign. And we've raised something like 2.4 million from individual pledges, which gave us the confidence that the time was now for the launch at the gala. And then almost immediately we had to pivot away from that, because in spring last year, it just didn't feel appropriate to be doing long-term bursary fundraising when there was so much short-term need on our doorstep. And that was a really difficult decision, and that felt like it could have definitely been the wrong one. Like, there's a complete alternate universe where I can see Highgate is here sort of failing, because people say, well, you know, what about bursaries? That's all you've been talking about for the past couple of years. Why has this all changed? Are you just getting on a bandwagon? I can see how that could have happened had we been a different sort of school, and had we not had the Chrysalis programme, and had we not had LET, and had we not been doing this work alongside the preparatory bursary work that we've been doing. So that feels like a bit of a politician's answer, because I've started talking about a failure and spun it back to a success. But it really did feel like this could be very much the wrong thing to do. But I guess in our gut, there was enough telling us to go with it.
And you mentioned earlier that the authenticity, if it feels right, if you've got a strong enough shared why, that shared vision as to why does it matter, why is it what you're doing is really something you're feeling passionate about. If that shared why is confident enough in it, and it feels like the right thing to do for yourself and a couple of, you know, key people that you're confiding in and making the decision with, then it's worth taking the risk. It's worth thinking about, okay, let's do something new, let's do something different, see how it goes, because it's rooted still in that shared vision. So what are your plans going forward? You're kind of thinking more a little bit about bursaries again?
Yeah, so again, every period feels new and interesting, and it feels like we've very much moved away from the sort of short-term crisis response. And at LET and at Highgate, I think we've been looking at all these problems which have been exposed, and how we can really make an impact for the next generation of students. So the way that Highgate will do this is by introducing more bursary places. And we're going to introduce these bursary places for the first time in our history in our junior school. So these will be bursaries for children at age 7 instead of currently at age 11. So we've got about 90 pupils currently at the school who receive bursary places, and these are mostly transformational 100% bursaries. And we've got more than a decade of alumni before them, former bursary recipients who have gone on to fantastic careers and amazing universities. So we've really seen that the programme works, not just for the individuals, but I think every child at an independent school benefits from growing up in a diverse atmosphere. So as well as bursaries benefiting the individual recipient, it really does benefit the entire classroom. We really want to make that true in the junior school as well, so that children are growing up, you know, from age 7, seeing difference as a positive thing. So we're doing the sort of preparatory work at the moment to make sure that these bursaries benefit the individual recipients in the way that we want them to. There's all sorts of things to think about with 7-year-old recipients. You know, their parents have to drop them off and pick them up, so they need to live quite local to the school, or we need to provide kind of outside school hours support if the parents are working. Things like accessibility for the interviews, to make sure that if English isn't the family's first language, they're not prejudiced in the application process. to make sure that we're looking for potential, not just preparedness, and to make sure that the introduction of these places is a really exciting, positive thing that's handled sensitively by the entire community. So we've already raised about £750,000 towards introducing junior school bursary places, and that comes on top of what we raised in the quiet days of the campaign before COVID. And we want to, we want to introduce a range of different awards. So they're not all going to be 100% transformational places, because we want to make sure that Highgate is representative. So we're going to be offering some 50% bursaries, which again is really different to what we're doing at the moment. I think it's, it is just so exciting to be able to offer these places to 7-year-olds of different backgrounds. Yeah, I can't wait.
Fantastic. And so much of what you've talked about there is echoing back to previous conversations on the podcast about bursary strategy and some of these choices around, as you say, transformational versus squeezed middle bursaries. Obviously, it's not a either or, but how do you balance that? How do you balance the different age groups you're bringing people in at for different year groups? All of these decisions need to be made at a really strategic level. So it's fascinating to hear the choices that you've made at Highgate. So it's really clear to me that Highgate's really leading the way in so many of these different areas, and some of the figures that you shared with us with regards to amounts raised, number of bursary pupils, and the impact that it's having are really impressive and really inspirational. There might be some heads, governors, senior leaders, director of development listening who perhaps haven't had as long to get these sorts of things sorted as you've been doing these activities in Highgate, might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, like this is a great example, but we're going to be nowhere near that yet. Do you have any advice for where people could start, especially on the fundraising side, in terms of thinking about their community partnerships or their bursary programs, if they're a little bit earlier on the journey?
I found being a fundraiser so much easier once I'd actually experienced what the partnership teaching program does, which again sounds like the most basic point in the world. But I'll be honest, for a couple of years I was talking about something and I could trot out quite a good kind of, script about the difference that partnership teaching made, but I hadn't actually seen it. I didn't actually have the sort of, personal anecdotes. So I think once I started to be a bit more honest about the fact that I just didn't know enough about this. And I asked colleagues if I could join them and kind of watch how it worked, and could I go and visit a local primary school, and could I just kind of see what a summer school was like. Then all of a sudden, it got so much easier to talk about inspirationally. Things that individual students have said to me just really stick with me. So I remember a girl saying to me once, I knew I had to come to this school because I'd never seen the word excellence and Tottenham in the same sentence. And I feel like that is a more pithy way of describing what the school's doing in the area that it's located in than we as fundraisers could ever come up with. So just really expose yourself and immerse yourself in the work that your school's doing. And that will make it so much easier to have fundraising meetings where you really can kind of inspire. A little bit more advice, which I think we all need to hear. I think probably, be a bit kinder to yourself. You're going to be your own harshest critic, aren't you? We all think we should be doing better and should be doing more. It's universal.
Fantastic advice. I know when I first started working in the very first school I worked in, and I was in a director of development position, and it was when I started doing that, then, as you say, all of a sudden you can speak with genuine, authentic passion for these things in a way in which just writing something abstract at your desk is never going to be quite as effective. And yes, and being kind on yourself, you can't do everything. Prioritizing the things that are going to make a difference is the way to go. Thank you so much, Emily. It's fantastic to share this time with you and to hear all about Highgate's journey, not only establishing itself within this area of school partnerships and bursaries pre-pandemic, but also to have a really honest conversation with you about how it felt in those early days to pivot and adjust your fundraising. And I wish you all the best of luck as we go through the next year. So 2021 is going to throw a few more surprises our way, I imagine. So thank you so much for joining us, Emily.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.